Mankind sent the first artificial object to space on October 4th, 1957. Since then, there's been a steady increase of launching satellites, both for peaceful and military purposes. On May 24th, 2019, SpaceX launched a series of satellites stacked together called the Starlink. 60 satellites were stacked together and released in lower Earth orbit, approximately 550 kilometers or 341 miles orbital altitude. According to SpaceX's website, their main objective is to provide high-speed internet access across the globe. But critics are skeptical of Musk's idea of providing high-speed internet. It's no surprise that these claims by Musk have been met with skepticism, particularly from astronomers around the world, saying that the 30,000-odd satellites would wreak havoc to the already congested space. So how congested is space? According to UNOSA, United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, to date, we have launched around 8,378 satellites into orbit, of which 4,994 are still in orbit, although 7 of the satellites are orbiting some other celestial bodies. So that means there are 4,987 satellites whizzing around the Earth's orbit every single day, out of which only 2,218 satellites remain operational as of 2019. This doesn't include the 18,000 other artificial objects being tracked by NASA in orbit above the Earth. Here's a short animation from NASA Jet Propulsion Lab of all the known near-Earth asteroids being tracked from 1999 to 2018. The short answer is yes, space is crowded, and in the last 20 years, it's only increased. The number of satellites is only slated to increase in the near future as mankind progresses in space technology. For instance, OneWeb, a telecommunication firm in UK, are scheduled to launch around 20,000 satellites just for 5G mobile communication. We're not exactly sure how many satellites will be used for 5G globally, but needless to say, we haven't even begun 5G operations in many countries, and the number of satellites is only slated to increase in the near future. The problem is only worsened with both China and United States blowing up their own defunct spy satellites in space, resulting in further increase of space debris. India recently conducted its own ASAT, anti-satellite mission, where it blew up its own satellite in space, joining a fairly exclusive select group of countries capable of destroying enemy satellites in case of war, wreaking havoc in enemies' communication systems, weapons, and missile guidance systems, which largely depends on these satellites. NASA claimed that India's ASAT mission created 400 additional pieces of debris that could endanger the astronauts in ISS, with the Indian government debunking that claim, saying that the Indian satellite was destroyed at a relatively low altitude of around 300 kilometers, 186 miles, well below the ISS and most satellites in orbit, and whatever debris that is generated will decay and fall back onto Earth within weeks. In comparison, China destroyed its satellite at around 800 kilometers, 500 miles, in 2007 that created debris that will remain for decades or longer, threatening the ISS and other satellites. This test by the Chinese created about 6,000 objects, and to date, only 616 have decayed. The main problems with these tests is that some of the objects are not large enough to be tracked. We're talking about objects as small as 10 centimeters in length. The weaponization of space is becoming a hard reality, with the United States in 2014 rejecting a joint Russian-Chinese proposal to ban weapons in space, saying it was fundamentally flawed as they don't have any means of verification. To date, only the United States, Russia, China, and India have demonstrated anti-satellite capability successfully. Elon Musk plans to cover the entire Earth in high-speed internet, solving two very big problems in this modern era of the internet. First, the lack of extensive, widespread, and affordable internet connections, and second, the significant network lag between two far-flung locations. Most of our broadband connections make use of fiber optic cables where information is sent in pulses of light. Starlink would not only be cutting the long-distance latency issues, but also provide high-speed internet services to the parts of the world where such access is unimaginable.
Starlink will effectively serve the, 3 or 4% hardest to reach customers for telcos, or people who simply have no connectivity right now.
What Elon Musk plans to do with Starlink is eliminate all these problems by simply emitting a beam of data from the satellites launched by SpaceX. In February last year, SpaceX had already launched the first two Starlink prototypes, called the Tintin A and Tintin B. This test not only demonstrated the basic concept of beaming data back and forth to computer networks via satellites, but also helped in refining the satellite design. On March 18th last year, SpaceX launched 60 satellites at once in a string orbit around 350 kilometers, 217 miles, in the lower Earth orbit. Once they were launched, the ion engines, or the Hall thrusters, kicked in and raised the satellites to an altitude of 550 kilometers, 342 miles. These satellites are around 65 times closer to the Earth than the geostationary satellites, and hence less laggy. SpaceX needs sufficient ground receivers to receive the beams of data from the satellites. The first batch of 60 satellites will be used to test the ground-to-space connections. Musk said that in the future, computer terminals with no moving parts and less than the size of a pizza box would be used to relay data to and from the Starlink. That would cost around $200, he added. Musk is looking to get a share of the estimated $1 trillion worldwide internet connectivity market, and this will help fund his ultimate goal of colonizing Mars and interstellar travel of humans. The initial 4,000 satellites has now grown to around 30,000 satellites. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission, FCC, has already granted SpaceX to fly 12,000 satellites, and in the future, perhaps up to as many as 30,000 satellites. Just so you know, at present there are around 2,000 active artificial satellites orbiting the Earth and only 9,000 launches in all of our history. Based on the success of Tintin A and Tintin B, SpaceX asked the space regulators to allow operation of their satellites at even lower altitudes than originally planned so as to reduce latency. One might wonder, what about all the 20,000 odd objects that NASA is currently tracking? Won't SpaceX be contributing to the already congested space? Not exactly. SpaceX claims that at the end of its satellite's life, they will utilize their onboard propulsion systems to deorbit over the course of a few months. So what if their propulsion system malfunctions? Well, they claim that the satellites will eventually burn up in the Earth's atmosphere within 1 to 5 years. That's significantly less than the hundreds, if not thousands of years required at higher altitudes. SpaceX claims that each of their satellites would weigh approximately 260 kilograms, 573 pounds, and feature a compact flat panel design that minimizes volume, thus allowing for a dense launch stack to take full advantage of the launch capabilities of the Falcon 9 rocket. The 4 powerful phased array antennas on each satellite would output enormous amounts of data and can be placed and redirected in a short amount of time. Powering them is the singular solar array, which significantly simplifies the entire process, thereby making it easy to integrate it into the manufacturing process. The ion propulsion systems the Starlink satellites are equipped with are powered by krypton that enables the satellites to raise orbit, make any maneuver in space, and also deorbit at the end of their life. With a planned 30,000 satellites, the autonomous collision avoidance inputs from the Department of Defense's debris tracking system are utilized by the Starlink satellites. After SpaceX launched their first 60 satellites, astronomers spotted a linear pearl string of lights as the satellites whizzed in the lower Earth orbit. This news even surprised SpaceX. The brightness came as a rude shock to many researchers as they expressed concern about future images from highly sensitive telescopes such as the Vera Rubin Observatory, which studies the entire universe in detail. The backlash was immediate, with the European Space Agency, ESA, announcing that it had redirected its Aeolus satellite to undertake evasive maneuvers to avoid crashing into the Starlink constellation of satellites. SpaceX, meanwhile, stated that it plans to work with all organizations and space agencies to reduce the impacts of its mega constellation of satellites. SpaceX launched its second batch of satellites in November of last year and a third batch in January of this year, and expects to begin providing high-speed internet service by the end of 2020, although the present-day pandemic seems to have delayed their plans. The main problem is that it's just not only SpaceX, but major telecommunication companies like OneWeb and many others around the world who have similar plans, as we slowly but surely see the entire internet infrastructure laid down in the last century be replaced by constellations of satellites. So, we will leave it right here. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please do hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for more awesome content. See you guys next time.
Take my hand, we'll make it somehow.